Hi folks, in the last video there I told you what Jessup and Sum's definition of an entrepreneurial city is, in its self-reflexive, conscious, a strategic adoption of strategies in order to maintain their own competitiveness vis-a-vis other cities and regions. And in this short video, I'm just going to touch on the ideas of glurbanization and glocalization. And I wouldn't touch on it at all, but in the past, many of your colleagues have really gotten excited about these ideas and are kind of attached to these terms. But the Right, so I am touching on it, but the reality is nobody uses these terms anymore, and you probably shouldn't use these terms. In a sense, I mean, glocalization is still around, but and in fact, we have, our university has our department has a new BK21 program looking at glocalization, which a term I oppose our use of, but so I guess it is still out there and it is still worth considering, right? But try to avoid using it unless you have to do it for a particular class. God knows I'm going to wind up having to teach a class on glocalization soon. But despite that fact, I'll just sort of basically distinguish between them so that you're sure you know what's going on with this. And the fundamental difference between them is that glocalization is a firm strategy and glurbanization is an urban strategy, right? So when we talk about the strategic actors in glurbanization, it's the city, and sometimes, as in a case of Korea or whatever, it might also be the nation, and glocalization. And the other term is glocalization, in which the actor is the firm who is doing things, right? And the distinction is, and glocalization is going to be the most familiar notion to you guys, right? So I'll talk about that first. And that is, of course, that these glocalization strategies are firm-based, and the firms themselves seek out new forms of scalar or spatial divisions of labor. That is, in essence, this is the action of offshoring production, right? So, so firms break up their production centers and distribute them around the world in order to, as our last notion here of the governance piece, re-articulate the global and the local to create competitive advantage for the firm. And they might do this by moving manufacturing to a low-income destination, or it might be moving it to some combination of low-income and skilled work destination, or it might be part of a localization strategy in which, to reduce transportation costs, they simply establish local firms, local establishments to produce for local markets, right? So, so you might have, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and that produces the chicken for America, and then you might have a plant in Korea that produces it for Korea. And this is all glocalization and ways of redividing the division of labor globally. On the other side is glurbanization, and that is urban strategies, place or space-based strategies, including entrepreneurial strategies that seek to alter the city in such a way as to attract mobile capital, right? Because one thing we know about the era of globalization is that global capital is more mobile than it's ever been. It flows here and then it'll pull out and flow to the next place, right? Wherever it can find a good deal is where it's going to go. So cities are, in a glurbanization strategy, are trying to establish, sort of to distinguish themselves from other localities as a desirable destination for investment. And so that they can capture the flow of capital and keep it circulating locally longer than otherwise. And this might be, they sort of have this rearticulation of time and space for structural or systemic competitive advantage, which more or less refers to notions of altering the relations between a city and another city or place, right? You can think of Shanghai's new port that they built offshore that can service a huge amount of ships at one time, which is a way of structural way of altering the city in order to make exports more efficient, and part of that reduces, alters time by speeding up the travel, speeding up the movement of goods, right? A similar effort to change the time might be the fiber optic cables connecting London to New York, or New York, let me just be a little safer here, connecting Lower Manhattan to Jersey City, and just across the river, right? A lot of Manhattan firms that do all this high-tech trading that depends on, microsecond advantages in trade, has done a lot to lay down, the fastest fiber optics cables to New Jersey across the river in order to make sure that they can access the rest of the country, but also access their back offices with an efficiency unseen elsewhere. So that's a way of rearticulating time and space, which, as we know, are tied together, in order to create local advantages. So this more or less is the difference between glurbanization and glocalization. Glocalization is about firms finding different localities in order to create more efficient, profitable ways of producing their goods. And glurbanization is about cities trying to make their own localities, their own territories, more efficient and attractive to mobile capital. So in the next video, I will talk a little bit about Hong Kong, and then we will conclude for next week.